morning, friends. Today we will try to know about a very popular subject, or rather a very popular topic called yoga. It is quite popular, we all know. It is known all over the world. Today, particularly in all the Western countries, many people are practicing yoga, and then they have written a lot about yoga. In fact, more than our scholars, their scholars have studied yoga in greater detail, and then they have produced many volumes. And then this Patanjali Yoga Sutra, this Patanjali, who is the exponent of this Yoga Shastra, of course we can't say Patanjali is the only exponent, but it is there in all the traditions. Of course I will explain that. Patanjali's book, it describes the whole concept of yoga and the methodology of yoga in a very systematic way. So that is the reason why, more than whatever yoga has been taught in any other school, the Patanjali system is quite popular because he has formulated in a very methodical manner. So that is one thing. And this Patanjali Yoga Sutra is one book which has greatly influenced the modern psychology, because this book is it was studied, right? It is being studied right from the 18th century by all the Western writers. So it has influenced a lot, and then it has given rise to various concepts. In fact, it has influenced our understanding of the human mind, what is called consciousness and what is called the unconscious, as we call it. Unconscious doesn't mean that you fall unconscious and all that. What the mind which is below the conscious level. Mind functions at two levels, at the conscious level and at the unconscious level. As a student of Vedanta, you know that there are what are called vasana or samskaras. The impressions which are there accumulated in the mind over a period of time. Impressions means impressions of all our interactions, all our worldly interactions. All those impressions are there in the form of vasanas. That forms the subconscious or unconscious. And then that influences the conscious mind. At present, whatever I do is influenced by the unconscious. So the concepts like unconscious and mindfulness meditation, various other things, and also psychological counseling. Counseling is another thing which is having a practical application of this psychology. So like this, it has become very, very popular. And in fact, it is a sort of multi-billion-dollar industry in countries like America. Yoga is a sort of multi-billion-dollar industry. So this is the main thing about yoga. Then we have to see what exactly it is not. Yoga is quite often misunderstood to be physical exercises, isn't it? By the word yoga, the common man, usually yoga means yoga, okay, you have to sit in a particular asana, you twist your body into various shapes, and they are called asana. Asana means asa dhatu, it means to be. Various posture. Asana means actually posture. So in various postures you have to keep the body, and then it makes you feel flexible, and then the body becomes supple, and then you get more energy and whatnot. All those things are there. But that is only a small part of the yoga. Yoga is basically a system of philosophy also. It is not exactly something to do with asana. It is not something to do with pranayama only. So it's not like that. Yoga, the first thing we have to understand is, it is what we see in the yoga centers, like all these exercises and whatnot, maybe eye exercises, rotating the eye, and then keeping the finger and then drawing the finger near, and then all these exercises to the eye. Maybe the finger exercises, what we call mudra, that is also part of the yoga. So all these mudras, that itself is not yoga. All these, they are a small part of yoga, there is no doubt. So it is they are all a small part of yoga. Then what is yoga about? Yoga is about controlling the mind by controlling the body. So it is a great psychological principle that by consciously controlling your body, by consciously controlling your habits, by consciously controlling your external behavior, you can influence the unconscious mind. You can change your vasanas, you can change your samskaras, you can eradicate the bad samskaras. In fact, eradication of bad samskaras is the main theme in Vidyaranya's book called Jivan Mukti Viveka. Jivan Mukti Viveka, sage Vidyaranya, he has devoted 2 big chapters on this particular subject only. One is called Vasana Kshayam, that is to eradicate all these impressions and vasanas. Then manonasha, the mind itself has to disappear. That is the next stage. So vasanakshaya and manonasha, what he calls in Vedanta, the same concepts we find here. So the basic principle is, by consciously controlling the body, you can influence the mind. You can influence the unconscious mind. You can eradicate all the bad samskaras. You can eradicate all the bad things which are accumulated in the brain, bad impressions, in the so-called indelible impressions. They are also not indelible. They can be eradicated. They can be wiped out. So wiping out of all these bad samskaras is the main point. And why is this to be done? This sort of purification of mind has to be done because all this is a sort of preparatory stage. Preparatory stage for what? Preparatory stage for further meditation, for knowing about what is your real nature. So that is what it is about. So yoga is it is about eradication of all the bad samskaras and focusing your mind on what is your real nature. So that is another thing which we have to see. Then the third point we see about yoga is, it is there in all the Indian traditions. In fact, not only in the Indian traditions, but all the Southeast Asian countries, this yoga seems to be popular. And we of course believe that it has spread from India to China. It has spread from India to Far East, and of course they also, all those nations also, they also say that this particular tradition has traveled from India to all the Southeast Asian countries. So in fact, Southeast Asian countries also, all these Buddhist lamas, Buddhist monks, they are now great practitioners of yoga. In fact, in our own country, yoga is not such a great tradition, except for that yoga master, Yoga Ramdev Baba, who has recently popularized yoga. Apart from that, in all our traditional pitams, in all our traditional institutions of learning, yoga somehow is forgotten. Yoga somehow is forgotten. We are only dedicating our attention, focusing our attention on Vedanta. Whatever branch of Vedanta you belong to. You may be an Advaiti, you may be a Visishtadvaiti or Advaiti, whatever it is. So you follow that particular thing, and then the Swamis, of course, they show no signs of having performed any yoga because the Swamis and themselves are so unmanageable in their shape. So that is what we find in our, Hindus. But the Buddhist scholars, particularly from Tibet, particularly from other countries, Southeast Asian countries, they have developed this system quite well. They have meditation, long periods of meditation. What are the effects of meditation? All those things. They seem to have done a lot more hard work rather. And then in fact, it is these Buddhist monks who have popularized the yoga in the West also. In fact, more than the Hindu scholars, it is the Buddhist monks who have done a greater service, who have done greater hard work, and then who have popularized yoga in the West. So that we have to acknowledge, because in most of the Western universities, there are Buddhist monks who are in charge of Buddhism and whatnot, whereas Buddhism and also yoga and various, traditions. But in the case of Hindus, for all the Hindu traditions, you find some Western scholar only, you find some German scholar or some other scholar, but not a Indian scholar. So, unfortunately, that is our tragedy. So, okay, apart from that, what I want to say is, this system called yoga, it is there in all the Indian traditions. All Indian traditions mean Hinduism it is there, Buddhism it is there, Jainism it is there, and Sikhism I am not sure, I do not know whether it is there, this system of meditation, etc. I am not sure. These are the Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, these are the major traditions. So in all these traditions, this particular system is there. In Hinduism, where do we see? In Vedanta we see. In Gita we see. Just Gita, Atma Sanyama Yoga, the 6th chapter, the entire 6th chapter is about Atma Sanyama. Atma Sanyama means controlling the self, controlling or regulating as I said, first of all the physical aspects, and then through controlling the physical aspects, you go to control of the mental aspects. So that is what we see in Atma Sanyama Yoga. And I also gave the example of books like, this Vidyaranya Swami's Jivan Mukti Viveka, where he talks about eradication of all these samskaras and whatnot, bad samskaras. So like that, it is there very much in Vedanta. And then why are we not studying Vedanta, and then why are we going to Patanjali text? As I said, Patanjali has put it forth in a more systematic way. And students of Vedanta, we have no objection to borrow all good things from other traditions. Shankaracharya very clearly says, whatever does not contradict Shruti, we accept and we borrow. There is absolutely no problem. So that has been our approach. Whatever doesn't contradict the Shruti, we accept it. So that is why it is very difficult to say whether this tradition of yoga has come from the Upanishads or Patanjali, or it was independently existing in some form. Some other masters were there, because Patanjali himself says that he is not the propounder. Atha yoga anushasanam, he says. Yoga anushasanam means whatever has been told earlier, I am repeating. So that is what he says. So that is the picture. And it has continued over the centuries. This yoga tradition has continued over the centuries. And you say this Hatha Yoga, we have heard the word called Hatha Yoga. Hatha Yoga mostly concentrates on bodily postures and then breathing. Bodily postures associated with breathing and toughening the body and things like that. And in fact, it is closer to the present day martial arts. Hatha Yoga keeping the body tough. That is something which is associated with the martial arts also. In fact, if you see any martial arts movie, you find these exercises of breathing and keeping the body tough, and then, in fact, including the finger movements. For example, long ago I saw a movie called, the Blood Sport. Blood Sport, there the hero, he does all these postures, sitting on some hotel top. He does all these postures like this and like this. So these are the postures which you do. Angushta bhyam namaha, madhyama bhyam namaha, say tarjani bhyam namaha, madhyama bhyam namaha. He does all that. Whatever mantras, whatever things we do in the Sandhya Vandana, he does there before fighting the villain. So these are the traditions which are preserved there in the Southeast Asian countries. So this Hatha Yoga is closer to the martial arts also. That also we can note. Then, now coming to the yoga, Patanjali's philosophy, Patanjali's system as such, we have to understand that Patanjali yoga system is not identical with Advaita Vedanta. Patanjali yoga also talks about a samadhi. Advaita Vedanta also talks about a samadhi. But the samadhi as understood by an Advaitin is different from the samadhi as understood by the Patanjali yogi. So Patanjali yoga, the basic question is about the relationship between consciousness and matter. Whatever Indian philosophical system is there, the basic question is about the relationship between consciousness and the matter. Advaita Vedanta says that is non-dualism. Non-dualism says that there is only one thing called consciousness, and that consciousness manifests as matter. So that is what it says. And how it manifests? So we have postulated one interface called Maya, a creative power in that consciousness. And that consciousness only, it appears as all these things. And so whatever we see is, ultimately, it is an appearance in that consciousness which we call Brahma. So that is the, assertion of the Veda. And then, of course, taking the same Veda and some other portions of Veda. Some Advaita Vedanta relies on some portions of Veda. And the dualists also rely on some other portions of Veda. And then they give more prominence to those statements. Whereas we say that it is only a lower level. At a higher level it is one. Whereas they say, no, it is not like that. The duality has to be accepted. Duality means matter as different from consciousness. So the old words for matter and consciousness are Prakriti and Purusha. This is the system propounded by, postulated by Kapila Maharshi, who initially started the Sankhya Sutras. Who gave the Sankhya Sutras? Of course, Sankhya Sutras, they are also available, of course. Kapila Maharshi, and later another gentleman called Ishvara Krishna. He belongs to 1st century BC or something like that. So Ishvara Krishna, he gave what are called Sankhya Karikas. That forms the philosophical base for the yoga also. Yoga and Sankhya, they are called twin philosophies or sister. You can call them twins, we can call them. The Sankhya deals with the philosophical and theoretical aspect, and the yoga deals with the practical aspect. So that way we can understand. So the basic difference between Advaita Vedanta and the yoga Patanjali Yoga is that Advaita Vedanta is talking about only one consciousness appearing as matter, that is Chit, Sat, Chita, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, so that is what we say. Whereas Yoga accepts both Prakriti and Purusha. Purusha is not different from Atma, we call it Atma, you call it Atma, you call it Brahma, you call it Purusha. In fact, the word Purusha also is used in Vedanta. Purushottama, there is a Purushottama Prapti Yoga, the 15th chapter of Gita is about Purusha is the Purushottama Prapti Yoga. Purusha is Puri Chete iti Purushaha, that definition also we know. So, like that, the basic difference is that one is a dualist and one is non-dualist. So, apart from that, both the philosophies they say, you are basically, you means a human being, whatever you, the seeker, let us say, the seeker, you are of the nature of pure consciousness. And by mistake you are identifying yourself with the body-mind complex. This body-mind complex is something, according to yoga, body-mind complex is also real, according to them. It is something which is derived from Prakriti. You are mistaking yourself to be the body-mind complex. You are mistaking yourself to be one having some social identity. I am so-and-so, I am an Indian, I am a Hindu, I am a Brahmin, I am this, I am male, I am something like this, I have this particular social status and this is my responsibility and whatnot. And I have my own likes and dislikes, what we call raga and dvesha. So I like on the face of, when I look at a person, say by just merely knowing his name or caste, whatever it is, I like him or dislike him. So I have got my own prejudices, I have got my own love and hate and whatnot. All these things we are so encapsulated in the body. We are embroiled, our mind is embroiled with all these relations which we have. So what Vedanta and also Yoga say is that you are basically a conscious entity. You have to somehow extricate yourself from that. Vedanta says, okay, all this is mere appearance, your body-mind complex is nothing. Whereas Yoga also says, body-mind complex is not your real self. You are that conscious entity. You discover yourself. And for discovering yourself, of course, we need not go into greater details of this philosophy, because if we want to go into greater details, we have to take a textbook of philosophy and then read about what is Sankhya and what is Vedanta difference and whatnot. Ultimately, what do they say? They say you have to realize that you are a conscious entity. You are that conscious Purusha or Atma. You are not different from that Atma. That is what both the systems say. And how to know that? The way to know that is through your own mind, because the human mind is the only instrument which we have. The human mind is the only instrument either for bondage or for liberation. There is a famous statement, Manayeva Manushyanam Karanam Bandha Mokshayoho. The mind is the cause. The mind is the only tool. Karanam here means you can take it as a tool. Either for bondage or for moksha, that is liberation. The mind alone, mind is the only tool. And this mind functions at various levels. Yesterday in the class on Upasanas also I was saying that mind functions at different levels. It functions at the level of just cognizing a thing, just seeing a particular thing. It is called manas. At that stage it is called manas. In fact, Shankaracharya's, there is a very famous stotra where he says, Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham Shivah kevaloham. So that is in that particular shloka he says, I am not manas, I am not buddhi, I am not ahankara, I am not chitta, I am the consciousness which goes beyond this. That is what he says. So whatever mind, the human mind is seen at four levels. It has four different functions, let us say. One is the cognizing function. The second, that is called manas. The second level is you pay attention to a thing and then you identify it. You say, oh, this is this. Then the knowledge becomes your own. Yes, I know this, I recall it at some other time. That is where your I notion comes. Then later, the chitta level, where several thought processes they come. You recall all these impressions, they are there in the mind. All these impressions you can recall, you can sort them out in a particular fashion. You can build up your own new ideas. You can build up some theories, postulations, etc. You can think rather. That thinking stage that is what is called chitta. So in yoga, what they say is, the very first principle, the instruction is, yoga, how does Patanjali say, define it? Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, he says. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. You have to see these words, yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha. So yoga, it means two things. The word yuj. Yuj means to either to unite or yuj samadhu, that is to contemplate. It means two things. Here you can take both. By properly contemplating on the nature of reality, you are uniting yourself with the supreme reality. Uniting yourself means it is not as though you are uniting as a separate entity, you are becoming that, you are knowing that you are not different from that. So that is it. So, yuj, it gives two meanings, yuj dhatu. It gives two meanings. One is to say unite, yuj, what is that? Yuj yoge. And the yoga means yoking. English word is yoke. English word yoke and yoga they are very obviously very cognate, they are cognate words. Then the other meaning of yoga is samadhu. So it is either to unite or to contemplate. So this is the meaning, yoga. So yoga, then what exactly is this yoga? Chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta, I just explained the meaning of chitta, that thinking faculty in the mind. So the mind is constantly drifting, the mind is constantly moving, it is constantly having, it is in a state of flux always, and then there is a continuous stream of thoughts. And in fact, chitta srotah, for this Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the first commentary was by one gentleman called Vyasa. It may not be that the same Vyasa who wrote Mahabharata, the same Vyasa who divided the Vedas and all that, it may not be the same Vyasa, because Vyasa was more a generic name. The meaning of Vyasa is one who elaborates. You know the meaning called Vyasam. Avu gurinchi Vyasam raimu. That means you write a Vyasam on, say cow. So you write a Vyasam. That means you elaborate on that particular subject. So whoever writes in an elaborate way is called a Vyasa. So the meaning of Vyasa is that. So this particular Vyasa who wrote a commentary on this Patanjali Yoga Sutra, that is the first commentary. This particular Vyasa is believed to be of some 5th century AD or so. So this Vyasa, he writes the very first, for this very first sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, he uses a word called Chitta Srotaha, Vahati Punyaya, Vahati Papaya, he writes. Chitta Srotaha, there is a stream of consciousness, stream of thoughts. In fact, this idea called stream of consciousness, which the modern psychologists say, many of these things you can find the roots in Patanjali Yoga Sutra and also Vyasa Bhashya. Many of the terms which the modern psychologists use, you can find them very, very clearly in this Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Then the commentaries on that by, say, there are several commentaries by several writers, like Vyasa is one. Later Shankaracharya also is said to have written one commentary, I have not seen it. There is one thing called Vachaspati Mishra's commentary. There is another commentary called Vijnana Bhikshu. So like that there are several ancient writers who have written commentaries on this. So this Chitta Vritti, as I said, Vritti is, in Vedanta class I have explained this word. Suppose I am seeing this pencil. If I am seeing this pencil, my mind temporarily assumes the form of this pencil. My mind temporarily assumes the form of this pencil. It is called, suppose you call this a ghata. Ghatakara vritti. Pencil akara vritti. So the mind modifies into this particular shape. The mind has this picture in it. So that particular thought frame, if we can call it, like a photo frame, if we call it a thought frame, that particular thought frame or particular thought is called Chitta Vritti. And then every second the Chitta Vrittis are moving and they are constantly moving. So this Chitta Vritti, it is something like a stream. This particular stream, you have to stop it. You have to stop means these Chitta Vrittis are caused by several things. You see something, a particular object, a particular person, you interact, you may like him, you may dislike him. That particular, you may have, and that particular interaction with him leaves an impression on you. And then such things, they continuously happen all through the day. and unfortunately we don't review what is the value of all these things, and then we get drifted. So this chitta vritti, unless you stop it, unless you somehow break that stream, and then unless you focus on a particular thing, you will not be able to see what is the reality. So then, of course, chitta vritti nirodha, that is what is called sadhana. Sadhana literally means an effort. Sadhana, the very simple translation of sadhana will be, of course you say seeking, seeker, we say sadhaka, we say seeker. But sadhana literally means an effort. You are making an effort in order to say stop this chitta vritti. So anyway, we will continue this in the next say session, because by achieving this say cessation of this thought stream, you will be able to concentrate on the nature of the self. And so long as our mind is embroiled with our ideas of self, and then so long as the mind is embroiled with so many things like love, hate, dislike and things like that, you will not be able to stop these chitta vrittis. So gradually you have to purify your mind. So this purification of mind is a sort of sine qua non, an important prerequisite for say meditation. So that we'll see in the next session. Thank you.